The world is witnessing an extraordinary moment in the realms of faith and royalty. An unexpected intersection of two powerful global figures. Pope Francis, revered as the most progressive pontiff in centuries, has set his sights on none other than King Charles III, the new monarch of Britain. The relationship between the Catholic Church and the British Crown has always been delicate, shaped by centuries of division. Yet Pope Francis has just made a bold decision on King Charles that could reshape this historical narrative. After the Church of England's controversial move to cancel the word church, this decision could open a dialogue that may stir both religious and political arenas. What could Pope Francis possibly want from King Charles? And how will this impact the world stage? Let's uncover this gripping story. A new era of religious diplomacy. As the 21st century presses on, we find ourselves in an era where ancient institutions must navigate the currents of rapid change. Among the most prominent figures grappling with this reality are Pope Francis and King Charles, two leaders whose influence transcends their respective nations and religious affiliations. Their leadership may be symbolic to some, yet their decisions carry profound implications for millions of believers worldwide. While they sit atop institutions deeply rooted in history, the Roman Catholic Church and the Church of England, their views and reforms set them apart from their predecessors. Both Pope Francis and King Charles embody a bridge between the old world. The backdrop to their potential dialogue is one of complexity and perhaps subtle tension. King Charles, freshly crowned as the monarch of the United Kingdom and head of the Church of England, inherits a long-standing role as defender of the faith. Meanwhile, Pope Francis continues his mission of reforming the Catholic Church, emphasizing inclusion, compassion, and global outreach. The prospect of a conversation between these two influential figures comes at a time when the Church of England has made a controversial move, one that ripples through Christian communities across the world. This moment in history, with two iconic leaders at its center. If Pope Francis and King Charles sit down to discuss the current state of their respective churches, it could reshape the relationship between the Anglican and Catholic churches and set a precedent for religious dialogue in the modern era. The question is, what bold decision has Pope Francis made? King Charles, defender of the faith. To understand the gravity of this potential dialogue, we must first consider King Charles' unique position as a defender of the faith. The title dates back to 1521, when Pope Leo X bestowed it upon Henry V for his defense of Catholicism. Ironically, just a few years later, Henry would lead the English Reformation and break away from the Roman Catholic Church, establishing the Church of England with the monarch as its supreme head. Since then, every British monarch has carried the title, yet its meaning has evolved with each generation. For King Charles, it carries both weight and responsibility, but he has expressed a desire to reinterpret it in a way that reflects the religious diversity of modern Britain. Throughout his life, King Charles has demonstrated a deep interest in spirituality, but not just within the confines of Anglicanism. He has spoken frequently about his respect for other faiths, and even before his accession, he hinted at becoming the defender of faiths rather than just the faith. This vision of a monarchy that embraces and protects all religions is a marked departure from the traditional role of the British monarchy as the head of the Anglican Church. But as the Church of England navigates a rapidly secularizing society, it finds itself facing internal and external challenges. The recent decision by the Church to cancel or modify the use of the word church in certain contexts has drawn sharp reactions, especially from traditionalists who see it as a dangerous shift away from Christian roots. King Charles, though, has remained silent on the matter publicly. As the head of this institution, his stance on these issues is crucial. How will Charles balance his modernist inclinations with the expectations placed upon him as the leader of the Church of England? Could his vision for a more inclusive monarchy clash with Pope Francis's desire to preserve Christianity? These are questions that may well come to the forefront as they engage in this momentous conversation. Pope Francis, the reformist leader of the Catholic Church. Pope Francis is no stranger to making waves within the Catholic Church. Since ascending to the papacy in 2013, he has worked tirelessly to steer the Church in a direction that emphasizes compassion, mercy, and inclusivity. His papacy has been marked by reforms, some of which have endeared him to progressive Catholics and others that have raised concerns among more conservative factions within the Church. His open stances on issues such as climate change, LGBTQ+ rights, and the economic exploitation of the poor have made him one of the most recognizable, and at times one polarizing figures in modern religious leadership. Unlike some of his predecessors, Pope Francis sees the Church not as a fortress of unchangeable traditions, but as a living, breathing institution that must adapt to the times while holding firm to its core values. He has been vocal about the need for the Church to remain relevant in the modern world, without losing sight of its spiritual. This balance between tradition and modernity is one he has continually sought to maintain. The decision by the Church of England to cancel the use of the word church in certain discussions is likely viewed by some as a mistake. Pope Francis has an example of this tension. While he has been open to reform, he has also stressed the importance of safeguarding the essence of the faith. He has repeatedly emphasized that while the Church must engage with the world, it must not lose itself in the process. Thus, the bold decision to reach out to King Charles may be an attempt to ensure that reform does not come at the expense of identity. For Pope Francis, the Anglican Church's move could symbolize a deeper issue, a loosening of the ties that bind Christian denominations together. But as the speculations continue to swirl, is Pope's decision to invite King Charles a rather bold move that carries broader implications? More importantly, is he likely seeking to address this trend, aiming to strengthen Christian unity? Let's explore what this bold decision of the Pope about King Charles is all about. Pope Francis reveals a bold move on King Charles. Pope Francis' invitation to King Charles for a serious religious discussion comes at a critical moment. This bold move signals the Pope's desire to address the underlying issues that have arisen from the Church of England's decision to cancel the word church. But more than that, it reflects Pope Francis' broader concern for the future of Christianity and the role of religious institutions in an increasingly secular world. For King Charles, this invitation could present an opportunity to engage with Pope Francis on issues that are close to his heart: religious modernization, interfaith dialogue, and the monarchy's role in promoting harmony across different faith communities. But it is also possible that King Charles feels some trepidation about this meeting. After all, his views on religion, particularly his desire to be the defender of faiths, may not align with Pope Francis's emphasis on Christian unity and tradition. As they sit down for this historic conversation, one can imagine a moment where King Charles, deeply aware of the complexities at hand, might say, "Please forgive me." A subtle acknowledgement that his vision for religion might not fully align with the Pope. Whether or not such words are uttered aloud, the sentiment of humility and reconciliation will likely permeate their discussion. Pope Francis, in turn, may offer his own form of understanding, as he has done with other religious leaders in the past. But this dialogue will not be without its challenges. Both men come from institutions that have shaped the course of history, and both are tasked with navigating these institutions through a rapidly changing world. Will they find common ground? Or will their differences create a wider gap between their respective faiths? Speculation on the content of the religious discussion. What will Pope Francis and King Charles discuss during this momentous meeting? While the specifics of their conversation will likely remain private, it is not difficult to speculate on the topics that may arise. First and foremost is the Church of England's recent decision to cancel the word church in some contexts. This decision, which has sparked significant controversy, is likely to be a focal point of their discussion. Pope Francis may seek to understand the motivations behind this move and whether it reflects a deeper trend towards secularization within the Anglican Church. Another likely topic of conversation is the broader question of how religious institutions can remain relevant in a world that is increasingly indifferent to faith. Both the Catholic Church and the Church of England have struggled with declining attendance in recent years, particularly in Western countries. How can they engage with a generation that is less interested in traditional religious practices? And how can they do so without compromising the core values that define their respective faiths? King Charles' vision for a more inclusive interfaith monarchy as a challenge is also likely to come up. Pope Francis, who has made interfaith dialogue a key part of his papacy, may be open to this idea, but he will also be cautious about maintaining the distinct identity of Christianity. The balance between inclusivity and tradition is a delicate one, and this conversation could provide insight into how two of the world's most influential religious leaders view the path forward, a controversial decision by the Church of England. At the heart of this discussion is the Church of England's controversial decision to cancel the use of the word church in certain official contexts. On the surface, this may seem like a minor adjustment, a simple act of modernizing language to reflect changing social attitudes, but in reality it represents something far more significant: a battle over the identity and future of the Anglican Church. The decision was framed as an attempt to make the Church more accessible and less alienating to those who feel estranged from religious institutions. It was meant to invite a broader range of people into dialogue about faith and religion, spirituality and religion, and community. However, for traditionalists within the Church of England and for many Christians around the world, this move was seen as a concession to secularism, a retreat from the institution's fundamental identity. To many, the word church carries centuries of theological, spiritual, and cultural significance. Removing or minimizing it sends a message that the institution is willing to abandon its heritage to appeal to modern sensibilities. This decision has created a divide within the Anglican community, with some supporting it as a necessary step toward progress and others decrying it as a betrayal of the faith. The controversy didn't stop at the borders of the United Kingdom. Religious leaders worldwide, including many within the Catholic Church, have raised concerns about the long-term implications of such a shift. Will other denominations follow suit? Is this the beginning of a larger movement toward a more watered-down version of Christianity, or is it simply an isolated incident within a specific context? For Pope Francis, these are pressing questions. His decision to engage in dialogue with King Charles likely stems from a desire to understand the motivations behind the Church of England's actions and to assess whether this is part of a broader trend that could threaten Christian unity. Could this be a critical moment in the history of Christianity, where the decisions made today determine the trajectory of the faith for generations to come? Pope Francis' perspective on ecumenism throughout his papacy. Pope Francis has been a vocal advocate for ecumenism, the movement aimed at promoting unity among the various Christian denominations. He understands that, in a world increasingly divided along religious and political lines, Christians cannot afford to remain fractured. His efforts have extended beyond mere words. He has actively sought out opportunities to engage in dialogue with leaders from across the Christian spectrum, including Eastern Orthodox Christians, Protestants, and even non-Christian faith leaders. For Pope Francis, ecumenism is not about forcing uniformity or erasing theological differences. Instead, it is about finding common ground and working together on the issues that unite, rather than divide. It is about recognizing the shared heritage of Christianity while also acknowledging that diversity of thought and practice can strengthen rather than weaken the faith. However, the Church of England's recent "the word church" raises concerns for those who see it as a step too far in the direction of modernization. While ecumenism is about fostering dialogue, it is also about maintaining the core tenets of Christianity. Pope Francis may view this decision as a sign that the Anglican Church is drifting away from its Christian identity, potentially undermining efforts to strengthen ties between the various branches of the faith. By inviting King Charles into this conversation, Pope Francis may be seeking to reaffirm the importance of tradition. Even as the Church navigates a rapidly changing world, This dialogue could serve as an opportunity to explore the balance between modernization and the preservation of Christian values, a theme that is central to Pope Francis' vision for the future of the Church. The historical relationship between Rome and the Church of England. The relationship between the Roman Catholic Church and the Church of England has been fraught with tension ever since the English Reformation in the 16th century. King Henry V's decision to break from Rome and establish the Church of England was not merely a political maneuver. It was a seismic shift in the religious landscape of Europe. The consequences of this split reverberated throughout the centuries, creating deep divisions between Catholics and Anglicans that in some ways persist to this day. Despite these historical rifts, relations between the two churches have improved in recent decades. Ecumenical dialogue, particularly since the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s, has led to greater understanding and cooperation between Anglicans and Catholics. Yet the theological differences between the two churches remain, particularly on issues such as the authority of the Pope, the role of the sacraments, and the question of women's ordination. The Church of England's decision to cancel the word church could be seen as another point of divergence between the two institutions. While the Catholic Church has embraced certain reforms under Pope Francis, it has not. It remains deeply committed to maintaining its core traditions and teachings. The Anglican Church, by contrast, has been more willing to adapt its practices to reflect modern societal changes. This difference in approach could create new tensions between the two churches, potentially undoing some of the progress that has been made in recent years. King Charles' stance on religious modernization. King Charles has always been a monarch with a vision for modernization, especially when it comes to religion. His desire to reframe the title of Defender of the Faith to Defender of Faiths has been a topic of discussion for years. This proposed shift reflects his belief that the monarchy should not be seen as a protector of one specific denomination, but rather as a unifying force. All faiths practiced in Britain. This vision aligns with the multicultural and multi-religious society that Britain has become. As the Church of England grapples with how to maintain relevance in the secular world, King Charles' views on religion could play a significant role in shaping its future direction. However, his desire to modernize the monarchy's relationship with religion may not sit well with all members of the Anglican Church, particularly those who feel that the institution is moving too far away from its roots. In many ways, King Charles finds himself in a delicate position. As the head of the Church of England, he is expected to uphold its traditions. Yet, as a monarch who values inclusivity in religious practice, he is also expected to represent the diverse population of his kingdom. This tension between tradition and progress is at the heart of his relationship with the Church of England. And it is a tension that Pope Francis is likely keen to explore. The dialogue between these two leaders may center on how the Church of England can navigate this balance. King Charles, with his deep interest in interfaith dialogue, may push for a more flexible, inclusive approach to religious leadership. Will Pope Francis, who values unity and tradition, agree with this vision? Or will their conversation reveal fundamental differences in how they view the role of religion in their lives? In the modern world, public and religious reactions. The world will be watching closely as Pope Francis and King Charles engage in this historic dialogue. Both religious communities and the general public are likely to react with great interest, particularly given the controversial nature of the Church of England's recent decision. For Catholics, this meeting could be seen as a sign that Pope Francis is committed to maintaining Christian unity, even as other denominations grapple with modernization. For Anglicans, it may raise questions about the future direction of their church and how it will navigate the tension between tradition and progress. Beyond the religious communities themselves, this meeting is likely to attract attention from political and social commentators. The British monarchy, as a symbol of stability and tradition, plays a unique role in the global imagination, and any shift in its religious stance could have far-reaching implications. Similarly, Pope Francis's leadership of the Catholic Church carries enormous weight, not just for Catholics, but for Christians around the world. As the conversation unfolds, the reactions will be diverse. Some will applaud the dialogue as a necessary step toward religious cooperation in a divided world. Others may see it as a potential threat to the distinctiveness of their respective traditions. But one thing is certain, this meeting will not go unnoticed. The global implications of Pope Francis' bold move. While the dialogue between Pope Francis and King Charles may focus on issues specific to Christianity, the global implications of this meeting extend far beyond the walls of the Vatican and Buckingham Palace. Both men are influential figures on the world stage, and their conversation could set a precedent for how religious leaders engage with one another in the future. Pope Francis has already demonstrated a willingness to reach across religious divides, engaging in meaningful dialogue with leaders from Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, and more. His invitation to King Charles, though rooted in the shared history of Christianity, is part of this broader effort to foster unity in a world that is increasingly divided along religious and cultural lines. For King Charles, this meeting represents an opportunity to shape his legacy as a modern model who values inclusivity and interfaith harmony. The global implications of his vision for the British monarchy are significant, particularly in a world where religious conflicts continue to dominate headlines. If King Charles can successfully navigate the complexities of leading the Church of England while promoting a more inclusive approach to faith, he could become a powerful symbol of religious unity in the 21st century. The symbolism of the meeting tradition meets modernity. At its core, this meeting between Pope Francis and King Charles is deeply symbolic. It represents the intersection of tradition and modernity, of faith and progress, of two ancient institutions grappling with how to remain relevant in a rapidly changing world. Both leaders have embraced reform in their own ways, but they also understand the importance of preserving the core values that define their respective institutions. For Pope Francis, the conversation with King Charles is an opportunity to reaffirm the importance of unity within the Christian faith. He recognizes that the challenges facing the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church are not unique to one denomination. They are part of a broader shift in how religion is perceived and practiced in the modern world. For King Charles, this meeting is a chance to articulate his vision for a monarchy that reflects the diversity of modern Britain. His desire to be a defender of faiths rather than just the faith reflects a changing world, one in which religion is no longer confined to a single tradition. But how can this vision be reconciled with the responsibilities of leading a historically Christian institution? The symbolism of this meeting cannot be overstated. It is a moment where two of the world's most influential religious leaders come together to discuss the future of their faith. Faiths, their institutions, and their legacies, and in doing so, they may shape the course of history. In conclusion, the future of Christian leadership. As the conversation between Pope Francis and King Charles draws to a close, we are left with a sense of anticipation. This dialogue, though rooted in the specifics of their respective institutions, carries implications for the future of Christian leadership worldwide. Both men have demonstrated a willingness to engage with the complexities of the modern world, but they also understand the importance of preserving the core tenets of their faiths. For Pope Francis, this meeting may serve as a reaffirmation of his commitment to Christian unity and the preservation of tradition, even as the Church navigates a changing landscape. For King Charles, it could mark the beginning of a new chapter in his religious leadership, one that balances the responsibilities of leading the Church of England with his desire to promote inclusivity and interfaith dialogue. The future of Christian leadership is being shaped by conversations like this one. As the world watches, we can only speculate on the impact this meeting will have on the relationship between the Roman Catholic Church and the Church of England. But one thing is clear, this is a moment of profound significance, and the decisions made here will echo through the halls.